Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
If you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
welcome home.
welcome home.
Once darkness was our guide, say that you love me, don't say that you love me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. You say that you want me, don't say that you want me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. I still like an orphan, I guess, and my heart breaks to confess. Even while you hold me, 'cause I cry on the floor. Still don't know how to be yours. You say that you love me, don't say that you love me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. You say that you want me, don't say that you want me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. I still like an orphan, I guess, and my heart breaks to confess. Even while you hold me, 'cause I cry on the floor. Still don't know how to be yours. So love me or hate me, I'm not going anywhere. Leave me or take me, you still bear my signature. Know me or not, seen or forgot, I'm not walking out on you. So love me or hate me, I'm not going anywhere. Leave me or take me, you still bear my signature. Know me or not, seen or forgot, I'm not walking out on you. So love me or hate me, I'm not going anywhere. Leave me or take me, you still bear my signature. Know me or not, seen or forgot, I'm not walking out on you. I'm not walking out on you. I'm not walking out on you.
Hi everybody, I am about to provide you with 8, count them 8 super important announcements. And you are not going to believe number 7. That trick always works for BuzzFeed. I'm just trying to make the announcements seem spicy. But I really don't need that. These are super important. Announcement number 1. If you're tuning in on Sunday, June 18th, it's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to those of us who are dads, to those of us with dads. I hope that whatever you have planned to celebrate today, hope all that goes beautifully. And of course, many of us don't have such fond memories or good vibes when it comes to the topic of fathers for a host of reasons. So let me here also say we're with you all the same and hope that your regular old June 18th goes just as beautifully. Happy day to you as well. Second, if you're tuning in on Sunday, then it makes sense for me to say that tomorrow, Monday, June 19th, is Juneteenth. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states were now legally free. So suddenly plantations in cities all over the South had Union soldiers marching into them. Many of those soldiers were black, reading copies of the Emancipation Proclamation to spread the news. So this is 1863, but many states, like Texas, all the way to the west, were still under Confederate control for a time. So for enslaved people there, it wasn't until June 19th, 1865, when thousands of Union troops got there to declare to the over 250,000 enslaved people that they were now legally free in the U.S. So this kicks off a period known as Reconstruction, and I sincerely hope that you'll look into that at least a little bit, this Reconstruction period, if you don't know what that is. It's super important in our nation's history. So Juneteenth is our country's second Independence Day. It's been celebrated by Black Americans for a long time, but the rest of us, generally speaking, and I include myself in this, have been a lot less aware of it all. So happy Juneteenth, my friends. Okay, announcement number 3. On July 2nd, so in 2 Sundays, we're going to have online service right here like we always do, but no in-person service. So July 2nd, no in-person service. Please hear me. We're not canceling church. Nobody can cancel church, just no in-person service. Our sincere hope is that you'll tune in here, maybe you always do, and then go be the very best of what it means to be the church in whatever context you and your friends and family find yourselves in, okay? Announcement 4. If you are what one typically refers to as college-aged or young adult, or you know somebody in that bracket, we want to remind you that there's several opportunities to get together this summer, to meet some others, do some things together. Go to Crosspointe's College and Young Adult Instagram page at Crosspointe Cary YA, and there you'll be able to sign up for a group chat, where you can find out who the others are, get more information on the events coming, or you can just go to crosspointe.org/youngadults and see what's coming. As early as this Wednesday, there are things to do together, and there's more stuff being added all the time. All right? Okay, moving right along. Which announcement is this? Announcement 5. This summer, we're offering 3 opportunities that we're calling Summer Film and Dialogue. So here's how it works. You'll view a documentary or a lecture ahead of time from your personal device or your TV at home prior to the event, and then you'll join a pre-scheduled conversation about what you've watched. There's one on loneliness, the loneliness epidemic. There's one on the 13th Amendment, which is very much tied to Juneteenth. One on white Christian nationalism. So you go to crosspointe.org and register for one or all 3, as many as you find interesting. All right? See, I told you, I didn't need to spice these up. These are actually really important. All right, announcement number 6. Story Night is this Tuesday, June 20th at 7 p.m. at Fortnight Brewery in Cary, where we've had it for the last couple years. We'll have half a dozen storytellers telling true personal stories live, and all of the stories are based around the theme, I could have avoided that by thinking. And then also our very own Claybrook and Dale Baker will be playing some live music as well. And many of the songs that they play will be decided by you and your song requests. You can start making those right now. You can put song requests in the chat if that's still open. You can email us if you want to. Claybrook assures me that whatever you request, he will play. He didn't say that, but I would test it anyway. Also, don't forget to register. Story Night is a free event, but we want to know ahead of time for our sake and the brewery's sake what the head count is going to be. Helps us prepare. So go to crosspointe.org to register, and then also consider carpooling if you can, because parking can be sort of tight. All right, this takes us to announcement 7, which I am pretty excited to be putting in front of you right now. You might know and remember this lovely artist.
I pray if a prayer has been used as a sword against you and your heart, against you and your word, I pray that this prayer is a plowshare of sorts, that it might break you open, it might help you grow.
That's Spencer LaJoy, and that's their song Plowshare Prayer, which, of course, they wrote and performed and get credit for what a beautiful, timely, heartrending song that is. But also, we at Crosspointe had the honor of filming that video, and then afterward, I had the pleasure of watching people all over the planet get to be deeply touched by it. Well, Spencer is coming back to perform at Crosspointe, July 8th. They are putting on a concert, an outdoor show in our lovely little courtyard behind our campus, July 8th at 7 p.m. And I want you to know, if you don't, Spencer is an incredible artist, and it's worth seeing them perform anytime that you can. But I also want you to know that this concert is as much about their great music, their art, as it is about our community's desire to support them as a non-binary artist, a non-binary person whose very distinct voice and experience are having a huge impact on people, quite literally, around the world. And so one of the ways that this support is not only going to be ongoing, but happening at the concert, is that we've hired some pros to come and film the concert, to make a live music video out of the whole concert. It's going to be amazing. This way, Spencer will be able to share their live music by way of a really beautiful music video shot right there in our courtyard, and then multiply their ability to get their stuff out there into the world. So tickets are $5 a person. You not only get to see a great show for $5, but you'll be contributing to, and frankly participating in to some degree, in some really beautiful, honest art by a really beautiful, honest human being. It's going to be great. Look forward to seeing you there. Okay. So, great job, team. We made it. This is announcement number 8. If you want to help good things like we get to do together continue to happen, from things like supporting Spencer, like we get to do, to the day-to-day things that we get to do for those who find themselves with oftentimes nowhere else to turn for housing or food, support, medical care, all kinds of stuff, to all that we get to continue to learn and become together, and the various contexts in which we gather throughout the week. If you want to make sure that and so much more continues to happen, I invite you to contribute and sustain Crosspointe financially. There are a handful of ways that you can do that. Go to crosspointe.org/contribute to find out the different ways. You can even just text crosspointenc to 77977 and set up financial contributions right from your phone. It's pretty simple. So there you go. There is obviously plenty to join in on, plenty around here to be part of. I hope you find something to jump in on, and I look forward to joining something with you. Have a great day.
So today I want to do things a bit differently than I normally would. And I want to share with you a few stories. And while I don't normally create titles for my teachings, I'm calling this one, Guess What They Did. Now, some of you may be aware and some of you may not, but I was away from the day-to-day work here at Crosspointe for the past month. The board here at Crosspointe is incredibly encouraging for all of our staff members to take some time for sabbatical once every several years, and so I did my best to take them up on that encouragement. And the great news is, because we have such tremendous leaders here in our community, you very likely didn't notice any difference at all. And that's hopefully a result of us being intentional from the beginning about not building our church community around any one personality, but instead it being about the community as a whole. And I'm confident that's one of the things that allows us to be healthy in so many different ways. But additionally, I also took some time to mark, celebrate, and honor the fact that as of this past week, my wife Adrienne and I have been married 25 years. Adrienne has never been one who wants to be on stage or in the spotlight. In fact, there's a lot of people who interact with my wife on a typical Sunday morning who have no idea that she's my partner in life. But for everyone who does know her, they can attest to, she is an amazing, tremendous gift of a human being. A gift to me and our boys, the entire Crosspointe community, her family and friends, and all sorts of concentric circles of people. And so, I took some time off to do all of those things. And yet, in the meantime, the world doesn't stop moving, right? Life doesn't stop happening. And as I found myself listening and paying attention to everything that was going on, I found myself juggling a lot of different emotions. Because it wasn't long ago that I got an email from a person in our Crosspointe community. And in it, they explained that how they contribute financially to Crosspointe is through a large national Christian nonprofit. that's able to take non-cash assets like stocks and make it easy to donate cash to charities of their choice. However, they had received a phone call from one of the employees of this nonprofit that said that they would no longer issue checks on behalf of this family to Crosspointe due to our stated positions on inclusion and equality. Now, this particular nonprofit publicly states that they've processed donations to over 70,000 different charities. And the donor explained how this really doesn't make any sense because they've personally directed funds to be given to both faith-related and non-faith-related based charities through this organization for years, and there's never been any issue. So my first assumption, because it's happened multiple times in the past and in different situations, that this wasn't some random review of the 70,000 charities, but that somehow it was a targeted effort by someone to raise an alarm, claiming that Crosspointe, in their opinion, isn't, quote, Christian enough because of our commitment to inclusion and equality. Now, I don't have any clue how many people use a fund like this to direct their charitable giving. I imagine it's probably just a handful in our community. Most people, like my wife and I, usually just set up recurring contributions through Crosspointe's website. But several weeks later, we received another email from someone who had discovered that their contributions to Crosspointe through this organization had been stopped without their permission. They hadn't been notified at all, no email, no phone call. And because they had set it up to just happen automatically, it wasn't something they checked in on every week, and they didn't realize that this had been going on for months. So, obviously, that's disappointing and frustrating, right? But here's the thing. Both of these families, on their own, shared with me that they had contacted this other nonprofit, respectfully expressed their disagreement with the decision, how it was handled, and the inconsistencies of their approval practices. And then they shared with our finance team here that they were pulling their money out of this fund and that they would create another way to financially support Crosspointe without this organization's help because they were all in with Crosspointe. They fully believed that what we're doing together and putting out into the world is critically important right now more than ever. And then, even the families whose contributions had been cut off for months without their knowing, they didn't just start back up again through a different means, but they went back and contributed the funds from the missing months that had been cut off without their knowledge. And so obviously that was kind and encouraging and another reminder of what it means to be in this community together. But that's not all that was happening. While I was away, two of our middle school students who are very active in our student ministry here at Crosspointe were part of a group of 6 students that wanted to figure out how to speak out and advocate against gun violence in schools, have their voices and concerns be heard, and raise awareness against the lack of action by government officials. They had hundreds of people sign petitions. They respectfully worked with their school principal, secured a private meeting to meet with the head of security for Wake County Public Schools. They asked questions, they listened, they challenged and pushed back. They researched and gathered evidence and data, and then the students prepared presentations to share at the board meeting of the Wake County Public Schools. Now, when they arrived in the room, there's a lot of tension for a variety of different reasons, but one of those was because of the local chapter of another group that showed up at the same meeting. Now, this group has just been deemed recently, just in the past week, an extremist group by a national civil rights organization because of their outspoken efforts across the country pushing for the banning of books and history curriculum in schools that mention issues of race, gender, and orientation. So this chapter of Mom shows up in the room, and they have Bible verses printed across their t-shirts, and they bring a lot of, let's say, energy into the space. And so it's stated that there are middle school students who have prepared to speak, and they're going to speak first because they have school the next day, and they're going to speak toward the issue of gun violence in schools. And instantly, there's this audible scoffing, this dramatic rolling of the eyes from these group of moms. And naturally, that can be intimidating to anyone, right? Especially to 13 and 14-year-olds. But these students were undeterred. These Crosspointe middle schoolers, along with a few others of their classmates, stood up, spoke confidently and clearly and respectfully, and they presented well-researched evidence and advocated for themselves and thousands of other students just like them. And they made an inspiring case for change. And I couldn't be prouder of them. And all the amazing students throughout Crosspointe community who keep finding ways to creatively engage and live out and respectfully advocate for needed change in our world. Still, that wasn't the only thing happening while I was away. Now, another thing I I did during this time was try to stay off social media. Now, obviously, there's some wonderful things about social media, but there's also toxic things about social media. I think we can all agree about that. But for me, during this particular time, I thought I'd remove it from my mental diet during this time away. But as I started to re-enter a week or so ago, I thought I'd dip my toe back in the water a bit, and I came across a post from an extended family member of mine who had posted a picture of a pride flag and then captioned it with a Bible verse, completely taken out of context, that says, "There's a way that seems right, but that in the end leads to death." So, there's plenty we could get into about that, and how misguided and harmful that type of rhetoric is to our siblings in the LGBTQ plus community. But I'm just going to tackle how it made me personally feel, because everyone in my extended family knows that I'm a pastor, and they all know where I and we all stand on equality of all people. And so while I'm sure this probably wasn't their intent, because I'm sure in their mind they likely think they're taking some type of righteous stand for God and for biblical principles, however wrong and misguided I think that is, that's probably what they're thinking. But what I personally felt like was, is this really how they think of me? And how they think of Crosspointe, that by being an affirming and inclusive church community, that what I spend my time doing is actually leading people to death, that I'm killing people, that what I and we are doing here is harmful and destructive, and that it has some type of torturous eternal consequences to actual people. And so that stings, right? Again, I'm in no way wanting to equate the pain that type of rhetoric does to our LGBTQ siblings, but this is the work I was doing in my own head and heart after reading this particular post. And then later on that weekend, I was stopping by a friend's house who was hosting an engagement party for their son and their future daughter-in-law. I'm officiating the wedding, and so the future in-laws came in the room, they sat down, and they just started chatting. And when I asked them what they did for work, they went on to explain that they run a nonprofit that helps teenagers in the foster care system in another state. And through the course of the conversation, they shared how they travel to a ton of different churches to try to inspire people to foster teenagers, but how they face a ton of resistance and pushback and flat out refusal when families are presented with a teenager to potentially foster who identifies as LGBTQ. And so as a result, when they have teenagers who can't be placed with a foster family and they find them sleeping on air mattresses in a government building, they were like, I can almost guarantee you those particular kids are gay, because no one will take them. So that eventually led into conversations about our church here at Crosspointe. And I explained who we are, what we're about, and their response was, I've never heard of a church like that. That's amazing. I just want you to know that your church community is literally saving people's lives. And it gives me hope not to give up on church. Now, obviously, we know, all right, we're not the only ones that are out there, but it's still rare in our world. And they said, you know what? It gives me hope not to give up on church. And you guys are literally saving lives. So next week, I come back into work, and I hear of 3 families that have gone through the process to foster kids here in Wake County. And they confirmed the same type of statistics that this other family had shared about LGBTQ teens, and how that's true locally here as well. And I loved hearing how all 3 of these families made it a point that they were willing to foster any child, any student, teenager, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. And man, that did my heart some good to hear that. So here's the thing. I titled this message, Guess What They Did? Because here's what I want each of us to think about, right? When you reflect back on those stories in your own mind now, or later today, or later on this week, who is the they that is going to consume the majority of your thoughts? Who is the they that you're going to find yourself compelled to share with someone else about? Which they does your mind default to? Is it that organization and their leaders who decided that Crosspointe wasn't Christian enough in their mind, that we're too inclusive, so much so that they won't even process a check to us from a family's own money that wants to contribute here because they feel like it's violating some standard of holiness for them? Or is the they that you'll default to the families who resolved, okay, that's fine, we'll pivot, we'll find another way. And then they went through the hassles and the inconvenience to double down on their commitment to financially support this community because they believe that what we're all doing together is worth it. It's needed. Or is the they that you're going to default to in your mind this extremist group of local moms trying to ban books and erase history and wearing Bible verses across their chest? looking and sounding nothing like Jesus, openly scoffing and rolling their eyes at kids, trying to advocate for their own literal safety in public schools? Is your frustration with that and your kind of disgust with that, is that going to then cause them to be the they that you default to? Or is it these middle school students from our church and their friends who, even in the face of intimidation, stood up, didn't mock anyone, but respectfully and boldly advocated for necessary changes that the overwhelming majority of Americans support? And yet it still struggles to get traction. Or will the they that your mind most find yourself defaulting to and that you'll most marinate in your own mind perhaps be friends and families of your own that post things to try to further marginalize and demean marginalized communities like the LGBTQ community and that use religious rhetoric to do it? Or will the they in your mind that you'll keep coming back to be the families in our church that are stepping up to offer safe, loving homes and families to kids that desperately need it and that are literally saving lives? Which is the they that will most stick with you? What's the they that you're going to marinate on, that your brain's going to default to? And I share all those stories with you, and I want us to wrestle with that question because there's a very simple principle that holds true for each of us, that what we look for, we will find. Right? I mean, it's simple, but it's true. What we look for, we will find. If we look for things to fuel anger in us and fear in us, if we look for things to rail against and convince ourselves that the world is going down the drain, we'll find it. If we're looking for circumstances where we aren't getting what we deserve, where we're being treated unfairly, we'll find them. And if we're looking for examples that confirm our worst suspicions, that lift up the worst in people and of a particular group of people, we'll find them. If we look for people who flat out just don't get it, who are ignorant, who aren't as enlightened as I've convinced myself that I am, or who have insane perspectives on whatever topic you choose to look for, you'll find them. We'll find them. If we look for destruction, for despair, for betrayal, again, we'll find it. We will, because what we look for, we will find. But here's what's also true. If we look for glimmers of hope in the world that remind us of the goodness of people and of inspiring and beautiful things going on right in front of us, we'll find them. If we look for examples of kindness and grace, examples of courage, standing up against injustice and oppression, examples of love and showing up for people when they need it, we'll find it. If we look for integrity and generosity, if we look for examples of people who are willing to push through inconvenience and do hard things in the name of love, we'll find it. If we look for examples of people humbly willing to listen and learn, being willing to change their minds and evolve when better wisdom is gained around what it means to follow Jesus and love well today, we'll find it. We will. You will. Because the principle is true. What you look for, you will find. Paul was a follower of Jesus who wrote most of the letters that we find in the New Testament. And one of those letters, one that was written to a community of people known as the Philippians, Paul wrote while he wrote it while he was locked in a prison cell. And Paul's sitting on a rock floor in a prison in Rome, likely sweating during the day and trying to stay warm at night. He only would have food if other people brought him food. He's chained to a wall, so he has little opportunity to move, stretch his legs. And it's within this context that Paul writes a letter to a young church community that's worried about a wide variety of things. They have financial stressors and emotional stressors, problems with the government, threats to their safety and livelihood, all sorts of things going on. And so Paul sends them a letter from prison, and as he starts to wrap it up, he writes this: "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Now, let's be clear. Paul doesn't say anything about ignoring the stressors and the challenges, the pain and the injustices. He's not saying let's act like they don't exist, because it's important to acknowledge and face the reality of those. And he does that throughout his letters. But as he's wrapping up this letter, he wants to make sure and emphasize, listen, in the midst of everything going on around you, in the midst of the challenges and the difficulties, one last thing I want to make sure I remind you of is what you look for, you will find. And so whatever is good, whatever is marked by love, whatever is admirable, whatever's marked by integrity and justice, make sure you don't lose sight of those things. Make sure you take time to consider those things and direct your mind toward those things, because otherwise you can be consumed in a vortex of negativity and cynicism and become convinced that's all there is, because again, it's just true. What you look for, you will find. And so with that said, I just want to offer you a few final thoughts and reminders that I think are important to keep revisiting. Because I know I'm not likely sharing any radical new insights with you today. This is just about reminding us of things we can tend to forget when certain emotions spiral out of control. And so one, let's be reminded that all of us, we're being fed certain narratives and stories by news and social media that specifically elicit fear, anger, and suspicion. And in contrast, other narratives that work against that are very often specifically being left out. Just as one example, take a look at this picture. Where do you think this is located in the world? Now, here's my hunch. If you grew up in America, I bet most of your first, second, and third guesses weren't, that looks like Iran to me. And yet, that's exactly where it is. Along with this picture and this one. Sometime just Google waterfalls in Iran sometime and just take in the beauty. Instead, most anyone who has grown up in America, when you picture Iran, the images that most likely come to mind are ones like these, with desert, tents, guns. Because the dominant narrative and picture served to many of us in America was one where Iran was only presented as desert with harsh conditions and violence all around. Because it invokes fear and terror. So it doesn't fit the narrative to show you pictures of families hiking around waterfalls, because that makes it much more difficult to objectify them in a negative way. And so when you think about current events in the world, partisan politics, national and cultural wars, don't let yourself get suckered into forgetting that you're being fed a particular narrative to elicit fear, anger, and suspicion. Now, this is important. Before you think this is just some disguised rant about blaming the media, here's what we have to accept. You and I, we are part of the problem. We create the problem. And until we stop seeing ourselves as separate from the problem, nothing really changes. For instance, I heard author Rob Bell speak to this several months ago, and he said something to the effect of, you'll often hear people complain like, oh, traffic is so bad today. And what they fail to realize is that the only way they know that is because they were actually a part of what made traffic so bad. By driving their vehicle, they helped create the traffic they're so frustrated by. They're part of traffic. Traffic isn't this separate entity that they can just blame and think that they have no part in. So in the same way, there is no media that you and I don't shape. It's not this separate entity that we can just blame and not take responsibility for how you and I, how we shape it and what we receive. Every time you and I click on a link, every time we pause a little bit longer to read a post or watch a video or pick a TV channel or watch a news story a bit longer than another, or share an article, post, tweet, or clip, even if it's just to fuel our disgust and anger and to share our disgust and anger with others, we shape what's delivered to us. We shape what gets put out there. We shape what sells and what makes money. You and I tell the media what we want, and they deliver. And understand, our brains want to default to the negative, to fear. They just do, because that often feels way more certain. And as we've talked about plenty of times before, our brains crave certainty. One addiction counselor, Dr. Steve Rose, he puts it this way: rather than confronting the discomfort of challenging our worldview, we would much prefer to stay locked into the negative reports confirming our sense of reality. We would rather have certainty about the existence of our fears than uncertainty about our worldview. Bad things are more certain than good things. As the saying goes, the only certain things are death and taxes. We expect bad things to happen, and the consequences can be permanent. We are not so optimistic about positive things, expecting them to be fleeting and rare. Therefore, if it's certainty we're after, negative news delivers more of it. So, soak on that. All right? The third thing to be reminded of: if we obsess only about why questions, it can become rather paralyzing. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to us? Why are these loud and extreme voices getting all the attention? Why does this group of people not see the things in the world the way I do? Now, don't get me wrong, asking why is and can be critically important and helpful at times. But often, when why is a mystery, it's easy to get stuck in those why questions and it paralyzes us from moving forward. And so, when why questions become paralyzing, start moving toward what and how questions. Admit, yes, this is a broken situation, but what can I do about it? How can I choose to respond? How can I help infuse love and hope into this one situation? Even though I know I can't fix all the problems, what can I do in this one situation? How can I love and be generous and kind in this situation right in front of me? How can I participate in a better story, in a story of healing and restoration and of justice? You see, those kind of questions propel you forward, and they propel hope forward. And that's important. And then lastly, intentionally put yourself in situations where you'll be reminded of good things going on right in your own communities. Things that you know, they'll never make the news headlines. They'll likely never come across your social media feeds. And what you'll find, if you'll let them, is they'll inspire you. They'll be a shot in the arm that fights against cynicism in your own heart. When I choose to think about the families that chose to fight through the hassles and the obstacles and narrow opinions of others to make sure that they could help fund Crosspointe and fund what we're doing together because they believe that strongly in the difference this community makes in the actual lives of people. When I choose to think about middle school kids from Crosspointe who at such a young age were willing to do something and advocate for student and school safety and against gun violence. When I choose to think about these Crosspointe families who open up their homes and lives to foster kids who others can't care for, or who in a lot of cases refuse to care for because of how God uniquely made them. When I choose to think about those things, I get inspired. Even when there's plenty of other things going on that sting and that hurt and that make me angry, I'm reminded that there's actually a lot of good going on in the world. And my heart and my mind needs that on a consistent basis because the pain and the tragedies and the injustices aren't going away. And I don't want myself getting sucked into a vortex believing that's all that's true in the world. So at our in-person services today, we're going to gather in groups for a bit after this message and just share some good things that we've noticed going on in the world. Now, obviously, you're watching online today, so maybe you take some time to talk with some friends or family members and just ask, what are some good things you've seen lately? What's something kind or loving or encouraging that you've witnessed, or something that you're proud of yourself for? Some kind of accomplishment, maybe internal work that you've done to become more aware. Perhaps do that similar kind of inventory on yourself. Ask yourself those same kinds of questions. If you want to gather in a way online, similar to what we're doing in person today, though, every Monday night we host an online Zoom call at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time called our Post Lobby, where Crosspointe people gather online to talk about the teaching and discuss related ideas. And so you can find the link in the description of the YouTube video. And again, you may not feel like you have anything personally to share, but there is something about being intentional to put yourself in situations where you can hear good stories and be reminded of good things going on in the world. So however you do it, I hope you do something, because the principle is just true, that what we look for, we'll find. So here's to being people who make deliberate efforts to look for the good, to look for kindness and love, to look for hope, and then find our own ways to participate in those things. You're loved, Crosspointe.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspoint.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspoint.org/care. And welcome home.